I am representing the patient side, and through my work with LeukaNet, which is a leukemia association in Germany, and I also come from Germany, originally from Hungary, so I also sort of represent that part of the world, but now I live in Germany. And so this is a leukemia association which has been around for a while, and which has been working with people living with hematological malignancies, and has developed a core skill set together with other patient organizations. Actually, it's surprising to see that there are some very strong associations, local, I mean national patient organizations, but also pan-European patient organizations in these various hematological illnesses. And so my job is to coordinate this patient cluster, as we call it, and also to make sure that certainly together with other representatives from the patient organizations, to make sure that we are meaningfully represented in the work of Harmony, which is a challenge, because it's Harmony is actually a rare example of projects, of EU projects, which take patient involvement very seriously. And once there's this possibility for patient organizations and for patients to be represented, we really want to use this for meaningful work. And so, but because it's relatively new and uncommon to have this high level of patient representation, so it takes a lot of work on our side as well to make sure that we are truly representative and that we can reach out to the patient communities and collect the right amount and the right quality of information as well. Because, you know, we've been arguing so strongly for so many years for the involvement of patients in clinical research and in biomedical research, saying that it's knowledge. So if you could learn it, I can learn it too. And just because I live with a certain disease, that doesn't make me dumber, or I will not lose my reasoning capabilities, or as a researcher, I will not use my methodological knowledge just because I live with an illness. And so, okay, this argument, we were successful with pushing this argument through, but now we really have to do our homework and get seriously involved in the scientific part as well. First of all, we're getting ourselves organized, which is sometimes quite challenging. So we reach out very actively to actual patient communities, to actual patient groups, and we also try to make sure that we are inclusive in terms of having real patients coming to these meetings, rather than spokespersons for them, which may sound simple, but it really isn't, because many of us have conditions that will prevent them from attending meetings. So that's a challenge. Also, we try to make sure that we adopt those scientific methodologies that create a common language with the researchers and the doctors, the medical community participating, and also the industry participating in this particular project, which is actually not a new process. This was described by Stephen Epstein for the HIV field, where I originally come from, in terms of medical sociology, how acquiring the language and the knowledge or the skill sets of science will empower patients and elevate them to the level of scientific involvement that's needed. So all we do is we rigorously follow the same scientific standards like any other researcher or any other contributor, be that the regulatory side or the industry side or academia. So what they follow, that's what we do. So if we say that we want to channel the patient's opinion, the patient's views into the project, then channeling doesn't mean storytelling. Channeling in this case means systematic research, which can be daunting for a patient organization. But we have to do it nonetheless. I come from this HIV tradition, where this was a long-fought struggle to get to this level of involvement where we are now. And it's so reassuring to see that actually we are ramming in open doors. It's not, so for this particular meeting, I felt so reassuringly welcome. And there was a proactive desire to understand what patients want, especially in terms of outcomes. So it was not only accepted what we said as patient representatives, but it was also actively sought for, which is quite, I mean, it's really reassuring. And I also believe that we could contribute some valuable insights, because, and I know this from other fields of research where I'm involved. Oftentimes you get so focused on your priorities as a researcher, or I have a child and she works in medicine discovery and medicine research, and I know from her as well that she gets so focused on the result, on the outcome of the experiment, and then whether this actually is meaningful for the patient becomes secondary for partly understandable reasons. And so we could then turn this around to some extent and say, well, maybe, let's say, overall survival rates are pretty, but maybe this is not my priority as a patient. Maybe I want a livable life rather than a long life. So, and that's been a very empowering process. We still have years of work ahead. And as I mean, the usual problem for patient organizations is how you can sustain the level of involvement when you have to rely so much on volunteer work and on precarious structures. And also, let's face it, we work with people who tend to die sooner than perhaps researchers or academics or industry representatives. So it takes a lot of planning and a lot of foresight on the patient's side. So we really try to remain objective and cautious before we just throw all caution in the wind and say that, oh, everything is so fine. We expect, well, struggle is probably not the right word, but we expect work. So in order to keep up this level of interest representation, this is not going to happen automatically, but it's something that you have to do on a continuous basis, and that can be a challenge for any patient organization. I think that the core message here is, if you come from the patient side, that for many years we have never really realized that being a patient actually is an identity. And I will not go into this whole debate about whether identity politics is right or wrong and how that positions you politically. It's not important. But if you are a patient, that actually places you in the hierarchy of society and in the hierarchy of healthcare. And I think that projects like Harmony, and there's a series of similar projects actually, but projects like Harmony help patients to turn this disadvantaged, this stigmatized identity around into something productive and something positive and forward-looking. And I think that that's tremendously important. And that's perhaps the most important takeaway for me. So that you can, especially, I come from HIV, I'm a person with HIV, so that's quite a stigmatized identity. But we can make it. So you will find patient advocates from the HIV world who have been out there and doing political work and, and working with other patient groups and with other disease areas, so you can make it. But it takes a lot of learning and it takes a lot of political investment into this work. So I think that that's perhaps the most important point for me and for my patient group where I come from.